The sun beat down on the streets of Athens with a quiet authority that only Mediterranean summers could command. Giannis Antetokounmpo walked alone. No entourage, no cameras, no signs of his towering fame. He wore a grey hoodie and sneakers that had seen better days, his usual camouflage when he wanted to be part of the city again, not above it. The scent of dust and warm bread filled the air, the voices of street vendors tangled with the rumble of distant scooters, and for a moment, he was just a tall man among many, anonymous and free. He passed by a small park that used to feel like an entire world when he was a child. The rusted fence was still there, curling like vines around broken poles. The basketball hoop remained, leaning slightly, its net long gone. He remembered the coldness of the ball against his palms in winter, the sting of pavement on his knees in summer, the way he and Thanasis would run plays barefoot until their mother called them home. Some of the concrete had cracked and weeds had taken over corners of the court, but it still breathed memory, sweat, laughter, hunger. Further down, past a row of faded kiosks, he saw a food cart that hadn't been there before. It was wedged between a tire repair shop and a graffiti-covered wall. Its metal frame painted a cheerful yellow. Smoke rose in soft curls from a small grill, the smell of souvlaki unmistakable and suddenly overwhelming. Giannis felt his stomach grumble. He hadn't eaten since early morning. He walked over casually, hands in pockets, pretending to study the menu scrawled in black marker on a scrap of cardboard. 2 souvlakis, please. Pork, extra onions. The man behind the cart looked up, squinting slightly. He was older, maybe late 60s, thin but not frail. His skin was sun-worn, and his eyes held a quiet sharpness, like someone who'd seen many hard days, but still greeted each one. His hands moved with slow efficiency as he turned the meat, then reached for pita and herbs. Giannis noticed a slight tremble in the man's fingers, but it didn't slow him down. "Coming right up," the man said in Greek, his voice gravelly but warm. Giannis stood silently for a while, watching the man work. There was something oddly familiar in the way he moved. Not his face. His face was different, worn by time, but the rhythm of his body, the careful patience in every motion. It struck a strange chord deep inside Giannis, but he let the thought pass. "Hot today," Giannis said, making small talk. The man chuckled. "This is nothing. Wait until August, then we melt." He handed over the wrapped souvlakis in layers of paper, folded precisely. Giannis reached into his pocket and paid in cash, declining the change with a polite shake of the head. The vendor tried to insist, but Giannis just smiled. "Thank you. These look perfect." As he turned to leave, the vendor hesitated, one hand still hovering near the register. His mouth opened as if to say something, but then closed again. His eyes lingered on Giannis a little too long. Giannis noticed but didn't push. Maybe he recognized him. Maybe not. Either way, it didn't matter. Not yet. Walking away, Giannis tore open the paper and took a bite. The flavor hit him hard. Smoky, tangy, just the right amount of char. It was good, better than he expected. He chewed slowly, savoring it not just as food, but as a piece of home, something raw and real, unsanitized by wealth or stadium lights. The sound of children laughing in the distance echoed down the street. He thought about how far he'd come from these alleys, from selling sunglasses to tourists to signing million-dollar contracts, and yet he felt closer to himself here than he did in any luxury hotel suite. He sat on a low wall and watched people pass. A woman dragged 2 plastic bags full of groceries, her shoulders bent from weight and years. A boy kicked a flat soccer ball, chased by his little sister. A man on a bicycle weaved through traffic like he owned the road. None of them looked at Giannis. Not really. That was the beauty of blending in. The world moved without asking him to be more than a man eating souvlaki in the heat. But even as he tried to focus on the moment, the image of the food vendor kept circling in his mind. That face, that voice, the posture, especially. It wasn't just familiarity. It was memory, half-formed and buried under years of noise. Someone from the neighborhood, from a youth tournament, an old coach. Giannis tried to pin it down, but it stayed elusive, like a dream you almost remember after waking. Maybe just coincidence, he muttered to himself, brushing crumbs from his shirt. Still, the feeling wouldn't go away. He finished eating, stood up, and looked back at the cart from a distance. The man was serving another customer now, head down, sleeves rolled up, completely absorbed in the small task of wrapping another souvlaki. Something about it felt sacred. As if feeding people wasn't just work for him, it was purpose. Giannis wondered what had brought him to that point, why a man with such quiet dignity was sweating over a grill on a back street instead of somewhere else. As the sun dipped lower and the shadows stretched across the sidewalk, Giannis made a decision. He would come back tomorrow. He needed to see the man again, not just for the food, not just for the memories. He needed to know why that face haunted him. The next morning, Giannis returned to the same narrow street, wearing the same hoodie, pulled low over his forehead. This time, there was no pretending he just happened to be in the area. He'd barely slept the night before, kept awake by the memory of the vendor's face, the flicker of recognition that had danced just outside his grasp. He wasn't sure what he was looking for exactly. Closure? Confirmation? Maybe just a thread to tie his past a little closer to the man he'd become. The cart was already open. The same thin, grey-haired man stood behind it, laying out paper, stacking peters, organizing bottles of oil and vinegar with a kind of ritualistic precision. There were no customers yet. The city was still stretching awake, the early heat already beginning to build. Giannis approached slowly, this time not hiding his curiosity. "Morning," he said. The man looked up, nodded. "You again? Back so soon?" Giannis shrugged. Couldn't stop thinking about the souvlaki. The vendor grinned. "That's what I like to hear." Giannis watched him work, silent for a beat. Then, choosing his moment, he leaned on the edge of the cart and asked, "Can I ask you something?" The man glanced up, curious but guarded. "Of course." "How long have you had this place?" The vendor thought for a moment. 10 years, give or take." Giannis nodded slowly. "And before that?" The man smiled, a little sadly. "Before that, I was a basketball coach." The words hit Giannis like a jolt. Not because he hadn't guessed it, he had, but because of the way the man said it, softly, as if it belonged to another life entirely. "Coach," Giannis repeated, as if the word alone could unlock something deeper. The vendor didn't answer immediately. He wiped his hands on a towel and looked down the street, as if remembering a time when things looked different. Local leagues mostly, youth programs, schools that couldn't afford equipment, teams without uniforms. We played anyway. Giannis felt his throat tighten. "You ever coach kids from Cipolla? Immigrant families?" The man's eyes flicked back to him, sharper now. Something unsaid passed between them. Then, finally, he gave a small nod. "There were these 2 Nigerian boys," he said. "Skinny, always barefoot, played harder than anyone I'd ever seen. One of them had arms like branches and a look in his eyes like he already knew where he was going, even if no one else believed it." Giannis felt every hair on his body stand on end. His heart thudded in his chest, suddenly loud in the silence. "You gave us a ball once," he said quietly. "Said we didn't need shoes to learn footwork." The vendor's eyes glistened, just barely. "I remember that." Giannis swallowed hard. "Coach Andreas?" The man hesitated, as if hearing his name after years of being someone else startled him. Then he nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "That was me." Giannis stared at him, stunned by how much had changed and how much hadn't. The face had aged, the beard had grown whiter, but the eyes, those eyes were the same, focused, kind, a little stubborn. "I've thought about you," Giannis said. "More than you'd think." Andreas gave a soft chuckle. "I doubt that." "I have. We always talked about you. You were the first adult who didn't look at us like we were a problem." Andreas's smile faltered. "You boys made it easy to believe. The talent was one thing, but the hunger, the work, I just showed you where the lines were. You drew the court." Giannis shook his head. "You gave us more than that. You gave us a reason to keep coming back, even when we had no food. Even when we got chased out of gyms, you told us we mattered." Andreas looked away, blinking fast. I only did what I could. What happened to you? The question hung in the air longer than it should have. Finally, Andreas answered, voice lower now. The funding dried up. The people in charge said immigrant kids didn't bring in donors. They cut the programs. I tried to start something on my own, but it's hard to build when no one wants to see it. I thought about leaving, had a few offers to coach abroad, but I couldn't. This is home, I stayed. And ended up here. Giannis gestured gently toward the cart. Andreas nodded. It's honest work. Some days are harder than others, but I get to feed people. That's something. Giannis looked down, jaw clenched. Guilt rose in his chest like a wave. I should have found you sooner. I didn't even know. You had your own path, Andreas interrupted. You became who you were meant to be. That's what mattered. Seeing you play, that was more than enough. No, Giannis said. It wasn't. They stood in silence for a long time. Cars passed. A pigeon flapped noisily from a nearby ledge. The city buzzed around them, oblivious to the quiet collision of past and present. Giannis finally reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. Take this, he said. It's got my number. I want to help. I don't need help. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering thanks. Andreas looked at the card, didn't take it right away. Why now? Because I forgot, Giannis said. Not on purpose. But life gets loud. People crowd around. You forget the voices that mattered most, the ones that were there before the lights. Andreas finally took the card, tucked it into his apron pocket. You've always had a good heart, just don't let them take it from you. Giannis nodded. Then, on instinct, he stepped forward and pulled the man into a hug. It was awkward at first. Andreas wasn't expecting it. But after a second, he returned the embrace, strong and steady. I'm proud of you, the older man said. Giannis's voice broke when he replied, I wouldn't be here without you. When they stepped back, neither said more. There was nothing else to say, not right then. Giannis walked away slowly, the weight of old memories finally finding form. For years he had carried that man's influence without knowing where it came from. Now, it had a face again, a name, a history, and it broke his heart that the world had moved on without ever knowing the story. In the days that followed, Giannis found himself drawn back to the yellow cart like gravity pulling at memory. The food was still excellent, but that wasn't the reason. He came early before the crowds when Andreas would be prepping onions or cleaning his small grill. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. There was a quiet understanding between them now, a rhythm that needed no words. Other times, Giannis would bring teammates from the national squad or his younger brothers, introducing them only as friends. Andreas never reacted to the attention. He simply served the food, nodded, smiled faintly, and returned to his tasks. It was clear he had no desire for the spotlight, perhaps because he had lived too long without it, or maybe because he had always believed the work itself was more important than recognition. But the world didn't stay quiet for long. Word travels fast in a city like Athens, especially when a global basketball icon keeps showing up to the same humble food cart on a backstreet near Sepolia. People began to notice. First came curious glances, then came phones raised discreetly, a few posts on social media. Then came the questions. Why was Giannis here so often? Who was the old man? Was this a hidden mentor, a relative, a secret project? Giannis ignored the chatter as long as he could, but part of him knew that the silence wouldn't hold forever. Fame had a way of digging, even into the parts of life you wanted to keep sacred. Still, he kept his promise to Andreas. He never said the man's name, never shared the story. It wasn't his to tell, not entirely, but that didn't mean he couldn't act. One morning when he arrived at the cart, it was closed, not just quiet, shuttered. The metal blinds were drawn, the grill cold. A small note was taped to the side in rushed handwriting. Back soon, apologies. Giannis waited. An hour passed, then 2. He paced the sidewalk, ignoring the confused stares of passers-by. Finally, he asked a shopkeeper nearby if he'd seen the vendor. The woman shook her head. He looked pale yesterday, like he was about to collapse. I told him to go to the clinic, but you know him. Too stubborn. Giannis's chest tightened. He pulled out his phone, dialed the number Andreas had reluctantly saved days earlier. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. That night he asked a family friend who worked in a neighborhood clinic to check the registries. After some pressure and a lot of persuasion, he got an address. He found Andreas in a small apartment near the edge of the city, in a crumbling building where the elevator hadn't worked in years. The man was lying on a thin mattress, propped up against a stack of pillows, his face gaunt, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to sip tea. He looked surprised to see Giannis at the door, but not ashamed. "I told you not to fuss," he muttered. "You didn't tell me anything," Giannis said, stepping inside. "You just disappeared. I wasn't trying to worry anyone." "You did." Andreas gestured to the cluttered space around him. "Not much to worry about, just a little fever. A lot of years catching up to me." Giannis didn't believe that for a second. The man looked like he hadn't eaten in days. His skin had taken on a pale yellow tinge. Something deeper was wrong. "You're going to a hospital," Giannis said firmly. Andreas shook his head. "I can't afford—" "You're going. No more arguing." The older man sighed. "You always were stubborn. You taught me that." It took time and help, but eventually Giannis got him admitted to a private clinic under a different name. The diagnosis wasn't catastrophic, but it wasn't simple either. Liver issues, malnutrition, chronic fatigue. Years of pushing through, of skipping meals to buy ingredients, of standing in the sun without rest had taken their toll. While Andreas rested, Giannis sat beside him every day, sometimes doing nothing more than listening to the old man's quiet breathing, as if anchoring himself to something fragile but deeply important. But he knew this wasn't enough. Paying hospital bills and buying medication, those were short-term acts. Andreas deserved more. Not money, not pity, legacy. A few days later, Giannis sat for an interview with a major Greek television station. It was meant to be about basketball, off-season plans, national team hopes. But when the interviewer asked about role models, Giannis took a long pause, then shifted the tone. "There's someone I want to talk about," he said. "Someone who changed my life before anyone knew who I was." He didn't name Andreas. Instead, he told a story about a man who had coached immigrant kids for free, who bought basketballs out of his own pocket, who made kids believe they were more than statistics or stories of struggle, who vanished from the system when the system stopped caring. "He taught us how to shoot, yes," Giannis said, "but more than that, he taught us how to stand." The clip went viral in hours. Fans all over the world started asking who the mystery coach was. Hashtags trended. People demanded to know why such a person had disappeared into obscurity. A few journalists traced the connection, but Giannis politely refused to confirm anything. He redirected the attention. "I'm building a new court in Sepolia," he announced on social media. "A court for the kids who are still playing barefoot. It's going to have someone's name on it, someone who earned it, every inch of it." He didn't have to say more. The court opened 3 weeks later. Fresh paint, new hoops, bright floodlights. And one name painted boldly on the center, Andreas Papanikolaou Court. The day of the dedication, Giannis brought Andreas there in a wheelchair. The man had argued against it, of course, said it was too much, too public. But when he saw the kids already playing on the court, laughing, sweating, flying up and down the concrete, he fell silent. "They don't know who I am," he whispered. "They will," Giannis said, "but more importantly, they'll feel what you left behind." They sat together at the edge of the court, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. The sound of a ball bouncing echoed like a heartbeat. Andreas smiled faintly as he watched a girl make a clean three-pointer from the wing. "That one's got a better shot than you had," he muttered. Giannis laughed. "Then maybe you should coach her." Andreas turned to him, eyes glassy. "You really think I still have something to give?" "I know you do. The court's yours, coach. Always was." They watched in silence after that. No speeches, no fanfare. Just the game, the movement, the joy. At some point, a little boy, maybe 9 or 10, ran over and offered Andreas a bottle of water, completely unaware of who he was. Andreas smiled, accepted it, and gently patted the boy's shoulder. When the sun finally slipped below the skyline and the first stars began to appear, Giannis stood, stretched, and looked down at his old coach. "You okay?" Andreas nodded, slowly. "I'm at peace." Giannis bent and hugged him again, longer this time, tighter. No words, just everything passed between them that could never be said fully aloud. As he walked away, the sounds of the court followed him, the shouts, the rhythm, the life. Andreas remained seated, his face lit by the court lights, a man finally seen, finally remembered, finally home.